Pleasant evening to the family of God at the Croydon Seventh-day Adventist Church. Happy to be with you one more evening, to be in your homes, to be with the brethren. And I am quite thankful to be here. Last evening, we had a wonderful time. And also on Sunday, we had a wonderful time. And no doubt today, I'm expecting us to have a wonderful time. I'm seeing only 26 people on the Zoom, on the platform, and I'm not sure what is happening. Didn't you invite your friends? Didn't you invite your family members? Sister Piet Brown, what have you been doing? Sister Eunice Johnson, Sister, Brother Harvey, what have you been doing? Have you been inviting people? But it's climbing. We are 28 now, and we are thankful. So today we are taking a slight deviation from our usual style. Sunday and on Monday, we had a presentation, and then we had question and answer. Today, we are going to have question and answers, and it is primarily focused on the area of singleness, or single men and single women of all kinds. You know, people become single for various reasons. You would realize that the singles club is increasing in our churches. In every functional church or church that is serious about family life ministry, there is a singles club, there is a married couples club, and there is also a senior citizen club. And but we realize that the single club is increasing. And there are more and more of our young adults being single, especially for women, more and more. And I know Balswick or Benocratis, in his book, The Contemporary Family, he indicates that as the education levels go up with women and people in general, they are less likely to get married early. 40 years ago, the mean age for marriage was basically about 23 years. But now it is much higher. People are getting married very much older than they used to. And we have more and more people being single in our church. With singleness, comes with a lot of wonderful times and also challenging times as well. And today we will open up for questions and answer as we deal with this matter of it doesn't have to be singleness. It could be sexual purity. It could be something that bothers you as a single person. You may not be single and you want to ask a question, and that is all good. So I believe Elder Francis has some questions that he would receive relating to the matter of singleness, things that are on people's minds. And I will invite him now to ask these questions.
Yes. Also, to add to what Pastor Shillingford just mentioned, if it is a case where you're uncomfortable to ask the question and you want to remain anonymous, you can type in the chat, and I can bring across the question for you. But also feel free to open your mics and speak if you so desire. So I have a few questions, and one of the particular questions that I have is, as a young person, how must I truly approach dating?
as a young person, how must I truly approach dating? On Sunday, we dealt with the Sternberg Triangle of Love. Most people approach dating with a Western view, Western romantic love. And the movies that we look at, the stories that we hear, the stories in books. So we are prone to approach mate selection with a Western style of thought. And because we live in Western society. And but what the research has shown is that Western romantic love, it really has some challenges. There are some challenges. It fosters infatuation and it proliferates this highly romantic sexual sort of engagement with people who like and love each other. A better way to approach mate selection, or rather dating, it is to approach it from the lens of friendship. So I spoke about Sternberg Triangle of Love, and there was one side of the triangle, which is friendship, and there's another side of the triangle, which is commitment, and the base of the triangle, well, the top of the triangle is passion. So 3 sides, 3 variables. Now, the only way you want to approach dating is through the lens of friendship. And why? When you get in age of Brother Harvey and Sister Pete Brown and the Johnson and Brother Stanley here, and you grow into the stage of senior citizen and you are into retirement and the breast is no longer standing upright. It is flat down on the chest. The bottom, the buttocks is now very flat. Your muscles are hanging down. All you have is friendship. And the false teeth. And the false teeth and the false, and so friendship. So if you approach relationship through the lens of friendship, you are safer. And I always like to examine how these two people come together. What is the level of friendship that they have? And when I see that Jane meets John online on Facebook, Jane is from London, John is from Jamaica, John likes Jane, they are building an online relationship, and then Jane comes to Jamaica or John goes to England and so on. And what you have here is a relationship that is really built on, I met you and I like you and I want to pursue you as an intimate partner, in an intimate partner relationship. But when friendship genuinely builds, because what friendship gives you is a context. I know you. It gives me a more rounded knowledge of you. I know when you're angry. I have a picture of you when you're at church, when you're at home, when you're just in the community. I really know you in a rounded way, and I have known you in the not so pleasant ways, in the ways you are down and when you are up and so on. It really gives you a better context of the person. So relationship or dating must be approached through the lens of friendship. When there is little friendship as a foundation for the relationship, what happens is that we move to passion and commitment. If we get committed to people that we are not friends with, then you are going to have certain difficulties in the future, in the near future. If we approach dating through the lens of passion, infatuation is going to ensue, and then we are going to have a very hard time. Most young people, or many young people, according to the literature, they are prone to approach dating and relationship through the lens of passion. And what happens is that when friendship is cemented And when it grows to commitment and passion becomes a sort of the outcome of friendship and commitment, you have mature and fulfilled love. But the problems we run, as I have said before, we move to the lens of passion based on our Western romantic love perspective. And we really run into trouble. You go out with this guy, you thought you like him, you really don't like him. You destroyed your witness with him, you all had sex, and then you try dating this guy, you thought you like him, you all went out. Although you all did not have sex, but you all went too far, and the list goes on. And it really brings a level of shame. But if you date or approach it through the lens of friendship, you are more likely to be in a safer zone. One, for your integrity as a Christian, and two, you are able to know the person better.
Thank you for that, Pastor. Before I move to the question that I have before me, there's a question that came up in the chat that I'll pose. Is it healthy to be single at a mature age? And the person is referring to meaning over 40.
It is perfectly normal. It is perfectly healthy. And we have to change our perspective on singleness. And sometimes we see it as a death sentence. Sometimes people pity us because we have not a spouse, a significant other, someone life with. And as a result of that, the culture has generated it, especially in the ecclesiastical culture, church culture. Brown will tell, how comes you not find a man yet? Me, I go pray for you. I'm going to pray for you that the Lord sends you a boy or a girlfriend or so on and so forth. But it's perfectly normal. It is healthy to be 40 and still be single. Nothing wrong with you. And let not society tag on you as not healthy or not normal. It is perfectly normal. If I should continue, in the biblical days, when you look at Isaac, when you look at these guys, 40 years was really the standard sort of for a man. You know what I mean? So when you look at the Old Testament times, not really in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament narrative, you see a lot of 40s coming out. So it is perfectly, and it is perfectly normal to be single all the days of your life. It is better to be single and satisfied than to be married and miserable. And I would say it's not normal to be married and miserable. It is perfectly okay. You have tried, but you have not really been successful, and you call it quit if the Lord wants to send that person to you. And if that is your stance, that's okay. You're not actively dating, you are okay. That is normal, and we must not place pressure on these individuals when they have taken that stance or life has treated them like that. It is not a terminal illness, and they can be very happy and very fulfilled, like the Apostle Paul.
Thank you for that response, Pastor. Let me just check the chat to see if we have another question. Yes. So the question is, in the pursuit of a relationship with prayerful guidance, what would you say are major red flags away from being equally unyoked?
Okay, so major red flags as it relates to mate selection, dating, is fundamental difference. A fundamental difference is a red flag. A fundamental difference could be religion, a view of something that is fond of or that you hold dearly. Let us say a fundamental could be Jane wants to have children, and Jack is vehemently opposed to having children. That's a fundamental difference. They're going to have endless problems. Now let us talk about personality or character flags or red flags. Now, as in the case of character, if there are, let me not pick out things, but if you're not comfortable with certain character traits or practices in this person that you are dating or you are hoping to be a spouse, if there are things that you are not comfortable with, let us say, and I will give you a real life story. My wife was not comfortable with certain about me, which it will remain nameless. But this is something she could live with. And so she went into perhaps marriage full well that I am like that. And something that she could have lived with, it was not something so detrimental. But she could live with it. But there are things that you don't think you can. You may be able to live with an untidy person, but there are some people who just cannot live with them. And that becomes a fundamental difference for you. So a gauge, rather than spelling out traits to you, I will use this as a gauge. If there are things that you are genuinely uncomfortable with, don't get into the marriage believing that the marriage will really cure things, because marriage don't cure issues. It can make it get worse. So whatever you're not comfortable with can be a red flag. However, one needs to know what they can live with. What can you live with? What can you endure? Because chances are you're going to be enduring for a very long time. So I may endure that my wife doesn't like to cook, and I have to be doing most of the cooking. But for another man, he may not be able to endure this. So what can you, and you need to make a differentiation between what can you endure and what you cannot endure. If you see things in the individual that you can endure, you like this person, you love this person, but this person has some traits that are not so wholesome. But these traits you can live with, then that's okay. But you need to find out those. Now that's why you need to categorize them. Can I live with that for a lifetime? Because chances are it is going to be like that for a lifetime. You want to rule out if any person is abusive, whether it is verbally, sexually, emotionally. You want to rule out abuse getting into marriage.
Thank you, Pastor. The questions are coming in. What would you say are the top 3 characters or characteristics that a single female should look for in a Christian man?
1, commitment. He needs to be committed. But how do you know that he is committed? Commitment in marriage says that I am committed to my wife, come what may. Things may get tough, but I'm going to work on me. If there are things to be worked on, I'm going to work on it to salvage the relationship with my wife. Commitment says that I value this relationship, I value you, and I will do what it takes to keep this relationship with you. Commitment. 2, constrained. Look for the ability in a man to say no. Let us look at Joseph. Joseph was a man in Potiphar's household. Joseph displayed commitment. Joseph also displayed constraint, the ability to say no even under pressure. A man who is not able to say no might run you into many problems and difficulties. In fact, human beings should be able to say no in a healthy way. I have a 2-year-old daughter. No is her first word. No, I'm not doing that. No, 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 no. Men must have a level of constraint, a level of constraint, a level of constraint. And I'm not talking about the trait of agreeableness or disagreeableness. I'm just talking about he can stand on a principle. He can say, no, I'm not for that. I am not doing that. That is true. So commitment, constraint, which is very good. Constraint is good for money, handling money. Constraint is good for even in the area of extramarital affairs. I can say no, no, I'm committed to my wife, I'm going to say no. So commitment 1, constraint 2. And here is another. Spirituality. If a man shows these 3 characteristics, now I want to tell you, not every man with these 3 characteristics is to be your husband. There may be people with these 3 characteristics, but uno mesh, your traits of cohesiveness may be low. So not every man with these 3 characteristics should be a man, or your wife, your woman, your wife. But if you like him and there is some level of, meshing and coming together, and he has these 3 traits: 1, commitment; 2, constraint; 3, spirituality, you are very, very, very good. These are 3 healthy traits for a man.
Yes. The next question we have here is, would you say then that a red flag is a differing educational background, one having a master's and the other not having a degree at all?
Very good question. Very, very good question. An educational difference can be a fundamental problem, and it can be a red flag. But notice the qualifying statement, can. Now, there are those who are not educated. However, they have a burning interest in knowing. They read, they can hold a conversation. They are intellectuals in their own rights. They are masons and carpenters and so on. But they have a very strong sense of reason. And you realize these people, they can hold a conversation. Now, the variable of education, one of the outcomes of education is that one may get a higher paid job, and that is not normally always the case. But the education, but we can't talk about nothing. And because of that, the man feels emasculated, that I am not able to match up with my wife's educational prowess. So yes, education can be a red flag, but I have seen where non-educated women married to educated men, and non-educated men married to educated women, and it worked very well because of the mindset. So there is no rule of thumb here to say that education, disparity in education is a red flag. It can become a red flag based on how the couple approaches it.
Okay. I'm hoping that the answers are really beneficial to our audience. They're getting a clear picture. Before I move on to another question, I'm just gonna read a comment that was made in the chat. It says here, in terms of dating, this person thinks that one should think carefully about what one wants from the relationship. Do you think it might be an idea to make a list of the ideals / qualities that one wants in the individual they wish to date? And if the individual does not meet those requirements, perhaps he or she might not be the right person to date. Of course, one dates with the intention of getting married. It is therefore important that one should not lower one's standards or expectations.
This question is loaded from a very intelligent person, critically thinking. I will tell you, those of us who are here, that in real life settings, people love is predicated on something. Love is not predicated on nothing. You love somebody because of something. So that is one. Two, that which we lack the most becomes what we want the most within or incorporated in the life of others. There's a theory in mate selection that exchange theory. Exchange theory, social exchange theory, it's a sociological concept, and it's a concept that is engaged in mate selection or dating. And the best example I can give you of exchange theory is in the life of Leah. In the book of Genesis 29:31-35, we are told that when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened up her womb. And Leah became pregnant, and she had Reuben or Simeon, whichever one of them. And the Bible continues to say that then she said, "This time my husband will love me." Then she continued with Reuben, and she said the same thing up until the time she got to Judah, and she said, "I will stop bearing," and she went to the Lord. She praised the Lord. Leah was giving babies or men of children, boy children, in order to get love. And notice what, "This time my husband will love me." She's engaging in exchange theory. And each one of us, the way we approach a significant other, we approach each other. One, we do endogamy within our culture, we date within our culture, and so on. But we move towards, so for example, I will ask people who come to get married, "Tell me, what is your greatest need that he fulfills?" And they will tell me, "Pastor, loyalty. I have never been loyal to, and he's so loyal to me." The relationship is predicated on that. And of course, other things come along. Now, this is in the real life. We approach people, our greatest desire, our greatest lack. When someone fulfills that, we are drawn to them and an inner satisfaction. For example, when I dated my wife, she gave me the most was stability. In her presence, I was stable. I felt stable, and I needed stability in my life as a young man. And that's what fueled me. And that's what really allowed the love relationship to be mushroomed, because we were friends for 5 years, even before we even thought of getting into a relationship. So know in your heart, not a list of things, but what is lack and need. Their greatest need is to be loved and cherished because mommy did not do that. They were not cherished in school. In church, it was the same thing. And they have this longing desire for someone to accept them unconditionally. And for some women, it is acceptance. So some women, subconsciously, they're in the dating world for someone to accept them. And there is something that takes precedence in your heart. And it's normally not a list, a catalog of things that I'm looking for, but in real life, there's a lack that you have that you really need. Samson, there was a need for Samson to feel important. And Samson now feels important with beautiful women who are not from his own race, his own tribe. And Samson will say, she pleaseth me well, get her for me. And that's why when we are dating, we must understand what is fueling our desire to be with a spouse. What is it? Is it a need that you want to be treated fairly, or you want acceptance? There is always something on the line. Yes, you want a handsome man. Yes, you want him to be able to have children. Yes, you want him to have at least a bachelor's degree. But there is something deeper that love is predicated on. You need to know that, because when I counsel people for marriage, I want to know from the man, and I want to know from the woman. Because when I know that word, that thing, that this relationship is predicated on, I now say, look out for that word: loyalty, acceptance, stability. And look out, understand yourself, understand your lack and your desires, and what is really driving you. It's very much important within the mate selection process.
Yes. Before I go back to the chat, there's some other important questions within the chat, but based on one of the questions that I had received before, which I see pressing, very important question. It states, what about masturbation? Do you think it is a healthy alternative to fornication?
Wow, wow, wow. That is a big question, Sister Brown. And Sister Brown is shaking her head. Sister Brown, you said something?
Said I didn't ask the question.
I know you didn't ask the question.
But I agree with you. It is that kind of question.
So masturbation, and some weeks ago we did a rap session at my church on pornography, and we did one on masturbation, and it was very, very interesting to hear the comments from the youth. Very interesting. It's a very much popular question. And I remember doing a seminar on masturbation at Sydenham SDA Church. Wonderful, wonderful questions. And masturbation is a response to a stimuli. The stimuli of sexual urge comes from two places: biological. We were born, yes, and we were conditioned to have sexual urges. And what do I mean? Skinner talks about conditioning. Pavlov talks about conditioning, classical conditioning. But two ways we have sexual urges: biological. The feeling to have sex is a natural feeling. The desire to have sex is natural. However, there are other stimuli stimuli in the environment that triggers the desire for sex. Pornography, illicit thoughts, pervasive sexual thoughts, reading Playboy magazines, looking upon a woman and lusting after her. These are stimuli. However, these stimuli they are very much aggressive. They are pervasive. They, they really are aggressive as it relates to the temptation in the mind. Many times when people masturbate, there is really a stimuli. And for many of us, or for many youth, it is a stimuli either of pornography, or there is illicit or pervasive sexual thoughts. Masturbation is not a good practice. Masturbation, you don't have to resort to masturbation. Now, I know if you go on the APA magazine, the American Counseling Association, if you go on many counseling websites, they will tell you that masturbation is completely fine. It's a natural reaction to the stimuli of desire for sex. And so in the field of psychology, it has been normalized. It is okay. But when you look at some of the effects of masturbation, it becomes addictive. One, there is a level of shame afterwards, and so on and so forth. And you are really not using your mind to a kind of sex that was not intended to engage in. And masturbation is not a good alternative to fornication. And I would dare say masturbation falls under fornication. Fornication is any sex outside of heterosexual sex within a covenant setting. So any sex that is outside heterosexual union within a covenant relationship, one that is before God and the court, the law, and you are in fornication. So adultery is a fornication. Masturbation is a fornication. Bestiality is a fornication. Homosexuality is a fornication according to the biblical standard. When one is masturbating, their thoughts are normally erotic. You are thinking on something. There is something illicit taking place most places. Now, in Sigmund Freud talks about the sexual development of children when in the anal stage and growing up, there is that manipulation of the clitoral glands or the penile glands and so on. But I will tell you, most, according to the surveys, of the masturbation taking place is as a result of an external stimuli, pornography, masturbation, pornography, what the eyes see, what the ears hear, and masturbation is resorted to. Tell me how you feel after an episode of masturbation. Yes, while you're doing it and there is an orgasm, yes, the oxytocin is released and the pleasure hormones are released and you feel good. But afterwards comes shame, especially when you do it on the Friday night and then the Saturday you have to sing on the choir or you have to do AY, you just feel so shame because it is not a healthy alternative to sex.
Yes, powerful question and timely response as well. In the chat, we have a comment whereby the person is recording that Ellen G. White speaks out against the practice of masturbation for Christians. And going back to the questions, is it a best decision to divorce one's partner due to an undisclosed health issue? In this case, one of the partners has HIV/AIDS, which she did not disclose to the husband. He only got to know after their child tested HIV positive. The church threatens to disfellowship the man if he leaves the marriage. Currently, he is negative of HIV. Another loaded question.
So if you look at and I must say, while we're on this, although we practice remarriage after divorce, the Seventh-day Adventist manual will tell you that there is no biblical grounds for remarriage after divorce. That's what the manual says. we base our premise for divorce based on the Matthean clause. I'd say the guilty party and so on and so forth. Divorce in scripture is one for adultery, fornication. Adultery, remember, is our fornication. So divorce, you are getting divorced on biblical grounds. Now, there are two schools of the schools of Beth Shammai and Beth Hillel, within the intertestamental times. When we look at Leviticus, Moses introduced divorce because of the hardness of their hearts, and the woman could be divorced and she could marry, but it was an abomination if she went back to the previous husband. And this was so, and the scribes and Pharisees divorced their wives very frequently for many reasons, because they subscribed to the more liberal view of divorce and remarriage. Within the context of the question here, it seems to me that what needs to occur is forgiveness as opposed to divorce. The thought says that he is no longer HIV positive. That's what it says.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he's no longer positive. Now, the grounds for divorce is adultery. Now, he did not inform of his status before marriage, but she is equally to be blamed. She needs to know. So he did not disclose, but sexual HIV status is something that is very much a fundamental thing that you need to know when you're getting married to somebody. In fact, you need to take an STD test results that needs to be mailed to the therapist. So I go to the gynecologist, we have done our test, these are mailed to the therapist. And then the therapist comes within the session and he has gotten an interpretation of the results, and here is what you all are both clean, and so that is there. Yes. So don't say he did not tell me. If these things are important for you to know, you need to ask the question. Necessarily, you need proof that this is so. You need empirical data. Right now, the wedding has gone through, they are married. I believe what is necessary now is reconciliation. Divorce has a long tail. Divorce will take you to places you never thought you would have been, and it will very much cause you to situations that you never thought or imagined. So I'm recommending here reconciliation, forgive me, I did not tell you. I thought I would lost, right? And so that needs to occur here. So divorce is the last approach, is the last line of defense for the Christian. But the first approach is for reconciliation. Let us work it out. I am in favor for this couple working it out, reconciliation.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I think Sister Brown.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Sister P. Brown.
Can I just say something? This particular issue, I think, is really quite complicated because it's about dishonesty. I mean, did the person willingly, fail to tell the spouse that he or she, has HIV? So there's that issue. And I don't see how or what right the church has in suggesting that if the man leaves the marriage, he'll be disfellowshipped. It's absolute nonsense, because there's so many things here now. One, as you've rightly said, there needs to be reconciliation. There needs to be an admittance that, look, I betrayed your trust. I was being dishonest. Therefore, we really need to have a conversation about this, because I think that other partner will be thinking, well, if he or she has been so dishonest, and hasn't told me something which is so crucial. What's going to happen in the next few years in our marriage? So there's so many issues here. And rather the church thinking of discouragement, everybody needs to be counseled, the church and all.
All right. Okay. So I want to say something, Sister Brown. The church has a right. When you become part of a church, the church determines its ecclesiology, its method to approach things based on its interpretation of scripture.
Yeah, of course.
When you read the Seventh-day Adventist manual, there's a large section on divorce and remarriage, and there is a clause there that we must engage. Your pastor regularly engages in perhaps marrying people, and he is also there. But the church has a right. The church has a right to guide its members. Perhaps this response may have been punitive to say, if you do that, I'm going to disfellowship you.
Yeah, quite.
But the church has a right to stand on a principle and to articulate that principle to its parishioners, which is very healthy, that you know where you stand. Within the Central Jamaica Conference, and I know at your conference, you must have it, there is a divorce and remarriage committee. If you are placed before the committee, but there is no grounds for divorce, and you would have gone to remarry, the church determines that, hey, there was not a ground. However, you want to remarry, you have done that on your own prerogative, and many persons have done that, gotten rebaptized and so on and so forth. So it's a very sensitive issue, but we want to establish the church has an ecclesiastical right to guide its members as it relates to divorce and remarriage, as per the interpretation of scripture set out by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So the church has a right.
Yes, I do agree. I do agree with that. But of course, looking at this, we don't have the full details really of the story, whether they've gone through that process where the church has counseled, et cetera, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Yes. So counsel, reconciliation should be the first line of approach. I think Pastor has a question, and Sister Watson.
I think the point that Elder is saying is quite germane. You see, I mean, Jamaica perspective is if we look at the church manual, it's certain section is culturally averse. I mean, the marriage might not be. So there's section in the manual that might be germane to the West Indies. That's not necessarily germane to within the setting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So not the marriage and the divorce section, but there are certain anomalies. And I think the point is that for a church to say to somebody who has been deceived, and I think that's the point my first elder is making.
Absolutely.
For the church has no right to say to somebody who has been deceived, whose life has been jeopardized by another party. The church has no right to tell that person that they need to reconcile and stay in the marriage. And say to the party who has been wronged that the party, if the party then steps out, then the party should be disfellowship. The church should be disfellowship for saying such a stuff like that. And because we upon reflection, Pastor, the person knew, if the person knew that because actually what the person has done is worse than adultery. The person has put the other party's life into jeopardy. Because we know HIV, okay, fine, there is drugs now that can keep somebody going, but it's actually a lifelong illness that has been passed on to that person. I think the church, if a church, well, it wouldn't happen in Croydon anyway, not under my pastoralship, but the church needs to, it wouldn't happen in Croydon. And I would be very happy to remarry.
Sorry, can I come in?
Even if it's losing my credential, because the other party has put the other person's life on the line. So that's my view anyway. That's my view.
And do we get it clear that the person no longer is HIV positive?
No, so sorry, I was going to ask the question. Now the
Because
woman
in my response, I am hearing that the person is no longer HIV positive.
no,
So
sorry.
that danger is no longer present.
Oh dear. Hello, please can I come in? I was going to ask the question. So the woman in question was HIV positive. She was a medical practitioner and she knew about it. In fact, she was a widow, and it was HIV that killed her husband before she met this other one. So she knew she was HIV positive. But when the man reported to the church, because they lost their son, it was after the death of the son that the doctor said, "Do you know what killed your son? He was HIV positive." The man could not believe it. So he was tested, he was negative. So when he reported to the pastor, the woman said that he did not tell him because she was on antiretroviral drugs. And because of that, she cannot infect the man. So that was why she didn't tell him. And she wasn't apologetic. She said she knew she was, and because she was taking antiretroviral drugs, so she cannot transmit the HIV to the man. So, but they went through counseling, and the conference president said, because of undisclosure and deception, you are free to leave the marriage. But the district pastor, the church pastor said, you must not leave the church, the husband, because you were once the first elder, you know about Adventist doctrine. It's going to be a jeopardy to the church. You're going to put the church to shame. For that, you must not leave the marriage. That even if that marriage is for better, for worse, that whatever thing that comes in it with it, you have to bear it. So for the past 3 years, he has not been coming to church. He left the church because of that.
And we don't want to spend all our time exhausting this question, but what can we take from this question? Very profound question, the feedback there, rich, differing opinions. However, what can we get from that if you are a single person regarding this question? One, yes, somebody has a right to disclose to them and be open and honest. You also have a right, and you have a responsibility to know the sexual or the status of the person that you are getting married to, especially something like STI, AIDS, gonorrhea, syphilis, and so on. We must not take it for granted that the person is telling the truth, or the person. We must be pragmatic, and England is a very pragmatic society, and we have to practice pragmatism even in our mate selection processes, in our dating. So we need to see the status. I know some people have gone as far. I need to know if you can have children. I need to know if your sperm count is good. While that may be taking it a little far, but it is of your health status, especially STI. One has a fundamental right to request that of the other person intending to get married. So yes, although the woman is to be blamed, the man could be described as naive or perhaps ill-informed as it relates to that process in dating and mate selection. And it goes out for us here. We cannot be naive. We must be pragmatic as it relates to dating and mate selection practices as a church. Whether they should divorce or the church should encourage or the church should disfellowship, this is an ecclesiastical matter. We are going to subtract the ecclesiastical approach for the conferences to deal with, the church to deal with, but we are dealing with the mate selection, dating process of things, and what we can derive from this question, what we can take from it to really impart knowledge into the singles that are here and who will be listening or to this broadcast.
Sister Watson, you have your hand raised for quite some time. You can pose your question.
Yes. For someone who has been living in Jamaica now since 2008, I attended Croydon Church and Lewisham Church prior to moving back to Jamaica. And one of the things I find in Jamaica is that there are a lot of women who are suffering from mental health issues within their marriages. And as a women's leader, I find this very disturbing in terms of the church's perspective on it from a cultural perspective, coming from a Jamaican perspective. And I agree totally with what Pastor Smith said earlier on. There is a difference in how the church views things in the Caribbean to how it would be viewed in, in Europe or in London or the UK. So for me, I think there is a issue here, and we were talking about lists earlier on, because sometimes you can make a list of the things that you are looking for in an individual, and you can overlook some of those because you're so wedded to your list. And for someone that is abusing someone in a relationship, and when they come to church, they are looking to be the most loving and attentive and that type of person, and then can hold a gun to somebody's head and tell them that if you tell the church about this, I will sort you out. To me, that is some places the church needs to think carefully to advise individuals, whether you're single or married. If you are in a situation where there's a mental health issue, then you should not be in it. And if you choose to divorce as a result of it, then the church needs to take a different perspective other than just saying, well, yes, this is the guidelines of the church, or, this is what we have to do. Because I think our lives as Christians, I've been through all the chapters, all the verses in the text in the Bible, and looked at this upside down and turned it all around. And I cannot believe that Christ would want us as women or men to be in a relationship where we are suffering. I cannot see that. And for the church to sort of push it to a side and said, oh, well, it's fornication, it's adultery, and it's this that we agree to, and not this. I think it's not the way for us to be moving forward.
The comments here are germane. And I don't want us to leave here to believe that in Jamaica our standards are archaic and very much inferior to the standards of the British Union. No, the church has its stance. We don't support people, we don't support abuse. And there are other clauses that the church permits for divorce and separation. Abandonment is one of them, and you find that occurring. Abuse that really cannot be resolved is another of them. And so the church has widened its scope as it relates to divorce and marriage and the interpretation of the text, whether we are in Jamaica or whether we are in the British Union, the British Isles. So that is standard. And we should never encourage people to stay in abuse, whether it is emotional abuse or physical abuse or verbal abuse. And the statement that many of our ladies are under mental health challenges, to say that it is because of the relationship, that we need empirical data to draw conclusions. Valid claims are solid claims. And so, for example, you hear many loose statements like divorce is the highest in the Adventist Church in Jamaica, and this may not be really so. Where is the data to prove that? What we know, especially post-pandemic and during the pandemic, that depression, anxiety, and mental health disorders were on a rise across the board. Marital satisfaction is at an all-time low within relationships, whether it is Adventist, whether it is Christian or non-Christian, and this is standard. So when we make claims, they must be validated, and we must also understand that what happens within the church is a microcosm of what happens within also in the wider society. But that point is very profound, and I do agree with you, Sister Watson. The church should never endorse abuse, never allow people to or encourage people to stay in abusive relationship. We must be the voice for the voiceless. And in many regards, I think we have done so. Some places we have heard, but in many regards we have done so. I think Brother Harvey had a question. Elder Aaron, we have deviated from this point. Remember, there are many more questions that we have to deal with. And
yes, Sister Jones, she touched a point of what I want to say. And this is not a scenario. A couple I've known for years. The husband used to be a colleague of mine in Jamaica. Now, the man is very abusive to her, physically abused. Eventually, she had us to leave. She's now divorced. And two pastors refused to marry her again.
Right.
And they are aware, I'm sure one of the pastors is aware, because at the time, he was the associate pastor at the church when all this abuse started, and child was born outside of the marriage, and the woman was like a punching bag. We as co-worker, friends of his, go to the house, talk to him, and he's like, him chase out us every house. I get out my house. It's my house. The woman eventually divorced him, and a few years now, and two pastors decide she's decided now to go to America, to get married in America. And so that is like, okay, the Bible say one thing, yes, and I have no problem what the Bible says. But how do we, as officers of the church, or pastors of the church, elders, or how do we guide people who are in abuse? And you can, have that shady red tape along to say, well, the woman is not a whole man, not much more than her. And you're telling her, I won't marry you again. You have to stay as you are.
mm,
Is that a fair deal?
I get what you're saying.
Pastor Shillingford, sorry to interrupt you there.
Yes.
And that is the point, it's one thing to have the mental health, but to have a life where you are in a relationship and can continue to live life, as we are talking here in terms of family life, is very important. So the woman may have made the decision to leave, but then meet somebody else and wants to remarry, and the church looks at it as if for this reason you cannot remarry. Okay, so that is the fundamental point of the issue. So when we make decisions, we have to be so careful about how we make them and who we're making them with, and how it's going to impact our life, because there are people out there now. And if you're talking about masturbation and sex toys and all of those things, there are women who are, be it biological, be it by desire, be it by stimulation, or whatever the reason is, need to have that. And research shows that having sex is good for your health, not just your mental health, but your physical health, in terms of the hormones that it produces for the body, etc. So therefore, what are we therefore left to do as singles, as divorcees, if it is that we cannot remarry?
And very profound question. And nobody has died because of lack of sex. Nobody has died. There is not a post-mortem that there is not a cause for death that says lack of sex, inadequate sex. You will never find that. And if you find that, just tell me.
I know.
And I know, yes, by observation, by a priori knowledge, there's an increase in the use of sex toys, and that is by sort of a case study observation. Not that I can put any empirical data for you, but I have seen the increase and realization of using sex toys as a. But I want to say here, under the authority of God, I cannot remain here and tell you that using a sex toy is okay and it's completely natural because sex is good for you. Yes, sex is good. Having an orgasm is very good for depression. It really soothes you, especially for a woman within the context of marriage. But let us also get back to the biblical principle that sex is for heterosexuals within a covenantal relationship. And the same person who has given us sexual desires is able to help us to control these sexual desires. And we must know that there is help for such a one who needs assistance where that is concerned. I am not going down to modern psychology that says that it is completely normal, that it is okay, and I will not go down that route. I must take a Judeo-Christian perspective and really espouse that perspective, because sex can become very problematic as much as it is very enjoyable and pleasurable.
Yes, Pastor. Yeah, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was waiting on you to recognize me. Sorry. And also, Pastor, sex is not a drive. Some people think that, I mean, I'm sure Elder Leslie, as a psychologist, and Sister Sharon, you're also a counselor, will say that sex is not a drive. And I'm sure Sister Judith knows that quite well, that sex is not, it might be a need, but it's not a drive.
I do know that.
Right. So whereas one needs water to survive, and one cannot survive without water. And as you say, I've never heard like yourself of an autopsy where, you know, the pathology says on the death certificate, died because of lack of sex. But obviously, I mean, and that's a good point. But come back to the point about the churches. The reason why the church has to be very careful in terms of divorce, and I've heard a lot of people ask questions. The reason why the church will not give a carte blanche, if you please, about is that people will just some people will find any reason to step out of a marriage. So one there has to be some barriers. There has to be some guidance. Some guidance in which is what you call ecclesiology. So there has to be that sort of guidance to protect the sanctity of marriage, to protect the sanctity of relationship, and to protect the family. So those are the parameters in which the church operates. And so what the church has done is to revisit its position on divorce. Mm-hmm. The church is saying, okay, fine. If the man is aggressive, or the woman is abusive, you can't have a divorce. The church's position is not about the church's position is not about divorce. It's about remarriage, right? And what the church is saying, based on the Judeo-biblical perspective, some people argue that Paul gives permission in terms of abandonment. The church does highlight that, but it doesn't amplify it. That's however, right. However, in terms of Jesus' position, you know, that the only reason why a man should not is because of adultery. And then Jesus goes on to say, and even then, and I think that's the point you're making about the man with the woman who was HIV positive. The church says, and even then, it's because of the hardness of the heart why you divorce, because you can't forgive. Yes. So for singles, but the point is for those of you who are deciding to get married, and Pastor, you made this very powerful point. It's critically important. Before I got married, my wife said to me, you need to go and take a test, and I need to see the test. She said, I need to see your medical certificate from a certified professional that you are pure.
Yes.
And I said to her, listen, you need to bring your certificate along with you two so that I can see the same thing. And so when I counsel any couple, I don't marry anybody in the church as a pastor without that certificate being presented by both the male and the female.
Excellent.
And also another point, it's not just about, because there are people also genetically, there are people who are genetically incompatible.
Yes.
So for example, I suffer from
anemia, leukemia.
No, not leukemia.
You are anemic.
Sickle cell.
Anemic,
so
yes.
I have the trait. So before I got married, I asked my wife, do you have the trait? And she had to do a test. If she had the trait, I would have to rethink, because obviously there are implications for children who are born within relationships. So yes, we need to do it. We need to make sure we do a genetic test to ensure, because there are some genetical conditions that some of us have, and if the other person has it, the child that is being produced within that relationship will live a life of misery and hell. So anyway, that's it's your session, but I'm
excellent,
just putting
excellent,
those points
Pastor.
on.
Very profound contribution to the discussion. There was a hand from Sister Morris.
Brother Morris,
Brother Morris. And there are two participants who have raised their hand.
It's actually Brother Morris. It's not Sister Morris.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you state your question? Yes.
Yes, sorry. I'm a bit late to the party. Some other responsibilities, I'm afraid. But it seems like the labor of the discussion tonight is on the issue of divorce.
No, it's on the day. We have deviated based on a question, but our substantive discussion is singleness. And we would really want to move or transition from the matter of discuss. I know Pastor can do a two-part Bible class for you on the matter of divorce and remarriage, but we want to transition or get back on track to the issue of singleness, mate selection, best practices, and so on, pitfalls, and so on.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk about divorce, so if I don't want to extend the digression, so
excellent.
I'll pass on here.
Okay.
Yes. Going back to a few questions with regard to for the singles.
Yes.
When should we begin premarital counseling?
That's a profound question. And I advocate, as one trained in therapy, that you could seek therapy. You should seek therapy before engagement. So don't come to me and you all would have engaged already. You have made up your mind. There is hardly anything that I can tell you that we can sort of extrapolate from these two people coming together that will cause you to change your mind. You have already made your mind. And we singles must approach premarital counseling within the lens that, hey, we have interest in each other, but we want proper guidance in relationship and so on. Also to determine if what we bring together is a good fit where we need. So the fact that you are even seeking therapy or premarital counseling doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get married. There are three outcomes from premarital counseling. Normally we see one outcome, that people get married, but there is wait. You need to wait a little longer. One, wait. Two, no, don't go there. That's danger. And three, blessings. You have my blessings. You should go ahead. I think the traits are very compatible. So get counseling before engagement. Engagement sort of put a bind in our mind psychologically. So we need to begin, and I see what is being introduced now is pre-marital or pre-engagement counseling, where we go through the traits or the compatibility issues and so on. And then there's premarital counseling. I see people taking that route. Now I have counseled people within that route as well, pre-engagement and then premarital. I encourage you to seek therapy, premarital, pre-engagement counseling, premarital before you have really made a commitment, a commitment to be with that individual. And here are the reasons why. One, it gives you time. It gives you time. It gives you enough space to think, to consider, to really evaluate with the guidance of a trained professional. So that is very important. So it needs to be done early. On Sunday night, I told a couple, remember, you need to see me soon. You need to see me. And why you need to see me? Because I am seeing you all getting ushy-mushy. There is the connection I'm seeing here is that, man, you all are getting there. So come and see me, please. So before you get engaged, you should seek that sort of therapy. However, in our church, what is more practice, what is practice on a greater scale, is that I engage this woman, we set a date for marriage, for wedding, and then we come in to just hear from you what you have to say just for the formality. Don't treat premarital counseling just as a formality and a precursor to get married. Treat it as a very important and necessary a part of your development as a couple. I go up to 12 and 14 sessions. Sometimes I keep it as a max at 12 sessions over a period of 6 to 8 months. So I'm not in a hurry to finish you. We are going through the processes. We are taking our time. You are learning skills, and I am fastening your business according to the Jamaicans. I want to know because that's why you come to me. And so we take it very seriously as part of your development for marriage. It has to be taken serious. We need a paradigm shift as it relates to premarital counseling.
Sister Kudam has her hand raised, but before we take Sister Kudam, just to add to that question just now, there's an individual in the chat asking what's the difference between the two, and I believe they're referring to pre-engagement counseling and premarital counseling.
Yes. So pre-engagement counseling is really a new phenomenon or new practice. Some say it is to get more money, while others say it is a necessary process. But so premarital counseling within this fashion means that you would have been engaged when it is preceded with pre-engagement counseling. So pre-engagement counseling, you meet this person, you like this person, and you will have some, things that you like about each other. So here is what we do. Let us go to seek counsel and therapy, and then so that if after that we realize, yes, so then we get engaged, and then we now do the other session. So if you would have done pre-engagement counseling, you don't need to do so many sessions in premarital counseling. You would perhaps need to do about 4 sex and family planning, and there are other things like finance and so on and so forth. But you would have done some sessions in pre-engagement, and that would matriculate you to premarital counseling. But you don't have to go that route if you don't want to. You could just stick with premarital counseling and have premarital counseling do both, achieve both goals.
Thank you for that, Pastor. Sister Kudam, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you. The question is about what you need to consider when it comes to the family. So I know that you mentioned in some of the earlier sessions about thinking through the culture or the family the person is from and thinking about the compatibility. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on what would be either a green or a red flag with regards to what practices people bring into the marriage based on their family.
Okay, so I think this is one of the first questions we approach, but perhaps you are coming on a little later, and we would, for your sake, we would like, so fundamental differences are red flags. So in the case of the HIV, there was a fundamental difference. There was a fundamental issue of health. Health can become a fundamental issue. 1, 2, character traits can become a fundamental issue. 3, finance can become a fundamental issue. But notice, what may be a fundamental issue for me may not be a fundamental issue for you. A fundamental issue for me might be, listen, untidiness and myself. No, you have to be a tidy person. And that is something I hold dear to my heart. You are untidy. We have a change in, we have a deviation in perspective regarding tidiness. What happens is that, brothers and sisters, is it becomes a fundamental problem. And we must never get into marriage with fundamental differences. So to sit here and say what are red flags, I would have to categorize them as fundamental differences. Children, you want to have children, but this man is vehemently opposed to having children. That's a fundamental difference. Religion is a fundamental difference. You are Seventh-day Adventist, but he's Islam. He's a Muslim. That's a fundamental difference. A fundamental difference can be in the area of education as well. You are a PhD and you think in a very empirical way, tested way, measurement and so on, but he only has school leaving and he really cannot hold a conversation. Your friends and his friends are of 2 different range, and that is going to cause fundamental challenges. However, there might be a PhD person who it's not a problem for her. Her man is a farmer and he goes to farm and they are okay. So we must understand that fundamental differences are different for each person, but in general, they come under the category of religion, finance, philosophy, key matters relating to the relationship or family, and never get into marriage. For example, the pastor has a trait of sickle cell, his wife having a trait of sickle cell. This is a fundamental issue. They should not get into the relationship. And let me reiterate and say that love is predicated on something. Love is not predicated on nothing. It is predicated on something. So I love you. We cannot be together because I know if we are together, we're going to dishonor God. We're not going to give our children the best chance at surviving within our family and so on. So in love, we have broken up this relationship. So, but I will tell you that the person you are going to get married to, they have flaws. They have flaws. They have flaws. Whether they drop from heaven and they look pretty and handsome, they have flaws. My question to you, and my question in premarital counseling, are you able to live with these flaws that you are seeing? Let us examine them. Are you able to live with that for a lifetime?
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for the summary.
We have a hand here, Galaxy S4, and after Galaxy S4, I'll move to our final question, which I have. Go ahead, Galaxy S4.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the last point there. I just wanted to ask, if 2 people really love each other and they through clinical differences, then they would have complications in having children. What if they decided they didn't want to have children but adopt because they really loved each other? Should they separate? Because love transcends clinical differences. If you really love someone, right? I don't believe, and to say that because I love you, I'm going to walk away from you, because once you walk away from someone, you can't love them anymore. you'll find it doesn't make sense to me. So if two people are really in love and they decide, they both agree, they don't want to have kids, but they'd like to adopt. So the husband could take care of the wife if she has sickle cell or clinical ailments, or vice versa. What do you say to that?
So who has spoken here? Is it Galaxy S4?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
All right. So
Yes.
so Galaxy S4. What you have stated here now, then this is no longer a fundamental problem for the couple. This is no longer a fundamental problem because we have resolved this problem. We have agreed before marriage that we are not going to have children. We are going to be very cautious. Well, let's hope that nothing happens. And we are going to adopt children. I'm going to get a vasectomy. The woman is going to tie off. And we love each other. You can love somebody and not married to them. Yes. It's based on our concept of love. Now Galaxy S4, that is no longer a fundamental problem. If you have decided to deal with that problem in a medical way, in a way that you say we are not going to have children. So you have really resolved that problem. Now, I am not a medical doctor, so I cannot tell you the nuances of having sickle cell trait and how is it passed and the other, this, that, and the other. But if you would have dealt with this medically, it is no, and you all are in agreement that this is what we are going to do, it is no longer a fundamental problem, but it is something that you all would have agreed with.
I do hope that has answered Galaxy S4's question. We have Pastor Smith.
Yeah, it's good to kind of reflect on the point about clinical love transcends clinical differences, and that's quite a new quotation I will probably add to my sermon. But it's not about love transcending clinical differences. It's about being sensible. It's about you see, it's one thing. And I've seen how much they love each other, but I've seen the challenges they're going to have, and I discouraged them from getting married. As a matter of fact, I didn't do the wedding, but they got somebody else to do the wedding, and they came back to me for counseling afterwards, because as much as they love, the clinical differences were too great for the love to transcend those differences. So the point I'm making is Galaxy S4 is not that people don't love each other, but there are barriers that are sometimes not the fault of the man and the woman, because on this platform we genuinely believe that a genuine relationship should only exist between a male and a female, based on the biblical directive. But love sometimes should not transcend clinical differences because of the consequences of that relationship. So we need to understand that a marriage or a relationship might look like it's a private matter, but it has social implications. And sometimes it also has eternal implications. So we need to sometimes, Galaxy S4 and those who are on this platform, many of us, if we had gone back over our lives and if we assessed some of the choices that we made, we would have recognized the red flag that Pastor spoke about, and we would have stepped back. But because we were so much in love, and because love seems to can transcend these clinical differences, we jump in, and when we are paddling upstream on a rainy day, we recognize that actually love does not transcend some clinical, and I'm emphasizing some, and in most cases it's greater the greater side is most clinical differences. So we need to be very careful and cautious. And in the case of sickle cell, if two people get married, they decide to have a child, we know that 1 in every 3 of those children will automatically contract sickle cell. And I've seen, as one who lived in a home with a family, whereby I've seen the impact of sickle cell and how dangerous it is on the family. So it's not that love cannot transcend, but I think we need to take counsel that we can love some.
Galaxy S4, you wanted to respond?
Yes, I did. Thank you. No, I do totally understand if, like, you know, two people get together and they say they'd like to have a family and one has clinical ailments. I mean, that's quite obvious. What I'm saying here is if two people love each other and they find out that one has a medical issue, right? Are we saying because of their love, they shouldn't, join and become one, like get married, basically? You know, I mean, I'm saying if they both agree to not have, like Pastor said, once they have agreed on certain factors, there is no issue there again. That's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about those who have medical problems and are planning to go and have a family. That would be quite stupid. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about two people who are in love. And, you know, because one has, for example, one has, any kind of sickness, but because of their love, they say that they shouldn't get together because of that sickness. I mean, I could kind of transcend it into relationships where, like, for example, where Moses got married to the woman he got married to, and Sarah didn't. I mean, well, that's something kind of different. I don't even want to go into that point there, but basically that was the point I was making. If two people plan to have a family and one has a medical issue, I can perfectly understand that. But I'm saying if they plan to, like, adopt, but they love each other, should they not get married because one has an illness? That's what I was basically asking.
Thanks for that, Galaxy S4.
And it's very much, some of the instances we are bringing here, we don't have some context. So it is very much, we will draw conclusions. But as Galaxy 4, listen to me, and I know you have done so. If in this particular case, with the variables that exist, you decide to deal with that threat, and it is an agreement with the two of you that you will deal with such consequences, you are moving ahead in faith. It no longer becomes a fundamental problem or issue. Now, so every case is different and we must treat it on its own merits. So we cannot broad sweep every case here with conclusions. But the conclusion I have drawn to you, it no longer becomes a fundamental problem. But it can be a fundamental problem. But something must be corrected here. Pastor Smith touched on it. You can love somebody and walk away and choose not to be with them. You can. And it's because of our definition of love. We have a Western romantic style definition for love. Let us look at a more Judeo-Christian definition and so on. And love is predicated on something. It is not blind. It is very much sensible. And many of us get into relationship with tingling things in our stomachs. And we become very much infatuated. And what that infatuation does, it's that it blinds our logics and prevents us from making good decisions. And many youth have made wrong decisions in a choice of a marital partner because of infatuation. Infatuation is a whole topic by itself. We would have dealt with it at a rap session in my church. Wonderful. But beware of the pitfalls of infatuation. Know when you are infatuated. Know when you are moving in willy-nilly, because easy come, easy go. And relationship takes hard work from the inception. I want to say that.
Okay. We'll take the final question and then we'll close out after. So our final question is, what if I decide to remain single? What are the pros and cons?
Yes, so what if you decide to remain single? That's perfectly normal. You are okay. We believe Paul was single. And of course, people can debate that. But he lived a fulfilling life. He pleased the Lord. And God sustained him. What are the pros and cons? Let us talk about the pros. One, you have more time for the gospel ministry, especially if you are gospel oriented. You have more time, you have less restricted time. You have more time to explore and so on. Your finances can grow more adequately. There is a cost factor there, although there are many singles who would waste the money on other things. But there's a cost factor, there's a time factor, there's a ministry factor, and so on. And Paul really admonished us even in the book of 1 Corinthians. There are pros, there are cons also. And there might be little cons because being single is perfectly normal. But you are missing out on the challenge and the joys of godly relationships. The idea of raising children within the Judeo-Christian framework, the idea of sharing your love and growing with someone, it's quite a wonderful thing. And of course, somebody would dare to say you're missing out on sex if you're with a spouse. And perhaps we can, but being single is perfectly normal. And I tell people it is better to be single and satisfied than to be married and miserable. And you can live fulfilled lives as a single person, just as you can live a fulfilled life as a married person. And let's not be pressured. If nothing is coming your way yet, don't make something happen in terms of you force something to happen. As I said, relationships should be approached through the lens of friendship, according to Sternberg triangle of love. And friendship grows into commitment. And out of that commitment and friendship, we have passion, sexual intimacy, and sexual disclosure. And I want to close in saying that enjoy your singleness, make it a matter of prayer, make yourself ready for a spouse that God may want to bless you with. Don't be selfish, work on yourself. You may need to seek therapy. You may have some baggage in the past. Work on yourself, make it a matter of prayer. And sometimes God surprises us. The Lord gave me a spouse. She was my friend. I never thought or imagined that she would have been my wife. We had pure platonic friendship in church, and we got to know each other as friends. And it was just pure. I never perhaps held her hand or kissed her during those times. Very pure friendship. And at the end of it, the Lord said, "This is the woman. This is the woman." It was confirmed by my mother. My mother said, "I would really love for you if you would marry her, you know." And by the time the Lord had already confirmed that to me, and he just used another source of confirmation. And so folks, it's a warning. Don't approach love relationship through the lens of Western romantic love. Approach it through the lens of friendship, pure friendship. And then that grows into commitment. And commitment and friendship will have an output of passion, explosive, euphoric expression. And I want to pray for somebody here who wants to be married. You have a desire. Yes, research showed that not women in the church, it therefore means that, and this is a practical and logical point, not all of us will be married. Not all of us will be married. And God bless you, you have found a wonderful man. God bless you, you have found a wonderful woman. But not all of us will be married because of this gender imbalance. And we don't support polygamy. We don't support polyandry. So you know where we stand. I want to, if there is no question, Elder Francis, there is no question, I would like to say a prayer for the singles.
Go ahead, Pastor.
Let us pray. Bow your heads with me wherever you are. Let us approach the author of love and relationship. Let us come before him. Father, we are grateful for the presentation here, the inputs, the questions, the feedback. Sometimes we disagreed, sometimes we agreed with each other. But I'm thankful for the instruction that took place here today. And I pray, oh Lord, somebody's eyes will be open. Oh Lord, I pray we would approach relationship through the lens of friendship and not through Western romantic passion and love. I pray for a young woman here who wants to find a man. It is okay, Lord, to want to find a man. And Father, as you are the all-seeing God, omniscient, I pray, Father, for this young lady, or ladies, Lord, that you will bring to their attention the one, dear Lord, you would have seen fit to be a spouse to them. While they are waiting, grant them patience and help them, oh Father, to have high levels of sexual purity. I pray for a young man here who has perhaps not gotten married and wants a Christian lady. Father, I pray that you would just move in a special way. And Father, if it is your will and desire for him to be wedded in holy matrimony, I pray that you would find him and assist him in finding a spouse. Thank you, dear Lord, for what you will do. Thank you for the restoration you will bring to the families of Croydon. And thank you, Father, for the revival in sound family life principles we will have, dear Lord, as a church at Croydon, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Elder Francis, I forget to recommend some books. There is a series of books. I read them as a young man. Every Man's Battle. It's by Steve Arterburn and Mike Yorkie. Every Man's Battle. Very good resource material for young men. There is also Every Man's Marriage by Steve Arterburn, and there is Every Woman's Battle. Excellent book for you if you're young and single, and woman and single. There is Every Woman's Marriage. If your son is 15 and 16, there is Every Young Man's Battle. It's the fight against temptations and so on. I read this book. Also, you want to read Messages to Young People, excellent book. Adventist Home, if you're getting into relationships, you want to read Adventist Home. The Adventist Home is becoming something that is rare. The principles of an Adventist home. Read that. And there is a text I want to leave with us here for the singles. Job 31 and verse 1. Job said, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then shall I lust upon a woman? We need to make a covenant with our eyes. Myself as pastor, Pastor Smith, Elder Francis, Elder Brown, our first elder, even at her age, we need to make a covenant with our eyes, because what is out there, we live in the most distracted generation ever, and Satan wants to get us with what we see with our eyes. Let us make a covenant with our eyes. Let us make a covenant before our eyes. May God continue to bless you. See you tomorrow as we go into the topic. It should not have gone down like that. You want to be a part of this. I'm sending out tomorrow. God bless you.